Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, he's been described as the modern American Prometheus. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Well, other than this eagle perpetually ripping out my liver, pretty good.
I'm glad. This week on the show, it is part 2 of our ongoing series taking a look at the potential 10 Best Picture nominees in time for the 2024 Oscars. This week, we're taking a look at the second biggest film of the year that didn't have Super Mario in it. We're looking at Christopher Nolan's latest film, Oppenheimer. Oh my gosh, Matt. This is a movie I've wanted to see since the day it came out, and I finally got to, and I'm so excited about it.
It's got a lot in common with the Super Mario movie, though.
Please explain.
Well, he's got a hat.
Okay.
And there's a power-up, which is...
There is a mushroom.
There's a mushroom. Yeah.
Cloud.
There's a Princess Daisy.
Yeah, true.
There's sort of a Bowser in both movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This
Robert
is a mode
Downey
of
Jr.,
analysis.
Definitely the Bowser.
Yeah, exactly. Matt Damon, I think, is Luigi. Anyway, we'll figure it out as we go.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what we're here to talk about, isn't it? After we finish our conversation about Oppenheimer, I did want to talk about the Golden Globes, though, because we had a conversation about them last week, and then they happened, and I have some things to tell you, Matt. There's some things that happen at this award show that are delightful and also confusing.
I can't wait to hear about it.
All right, before that, though, let's get into it. Let's talk about Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer.
We're in a race against the Nazis. And I know what it means if the Nazis have a bomb.
We have a 12-month head start.
18.
How could you possibly know that?
We've got one hope. All America's industrial might and scientific innovation connected here. A secret laboratory. Keep everyone there until it's done.
Let's go recruit some scientists.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
The story of American scientist J. Robert Oppenheimer and his role in the development of the atomic bomb.
This movie was written by Christopher Nolan based on the book American Prometheus. It was directed by Nolan, and it stars Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Robert Downey Jr., Matt Damon, and okay, like everybody, right? Like everybody's in this movie. Like Christopher Nolan went through my childhood and was like, oh, remember that stupid Disney Channel show, Drake and Josh? Well, we've cast Josh in this movie.
Yeah.
Also, Josh Hartnett is here. He hasn't done anything in a while, but here he is. He's in this movie.
He's a scientist. Rami Malek is here.
Yeah, for some reason.
For some reason, yeah.
Here. He really just cast everyone. That's crazy. Kenneth Branagh makes an appearance.
What Meg Ryan's son? What's his name? He's Feynman for 12 seconds.
And Alden Ehrenreich here, famously known as the second best Han Solo ever put to film.
Yeah. Wait, who is he? I'm blanking.
He plays the aide to Robert Downey Jr. that is
oh yeah.
Hates him by the end.
Wow, I didn't recognize him as Han Solo. That's amazing.
Yeah. Did you know his he doesn't have a name in the movie? This is such a Christopher Nolan thing. His name is Senate Aide.
That is a very Christopher Nolan thing. I mean, I kind of like this because there sort of is no historical figure. His role is just to be the audience insert to provoke Robert Downey Jr.'s character into saying things. So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Matt, where do we begin with this? I guess we can begin with you the way we always do, which is you telling me what you thought of this movie.
Well, I love this movie. The word masterpiece has been bandied about, and I think this is one of those movies that qualifies. It's powerful. It's a long movie, and you never want to take your eyes off the screen for a moment. And I've watched it twice now, and the same was true both times, even though obviously I knew it was going to happen the second time. And
arguably the first time.
Yeah, right. Arguably knew it was going to happen the first time too. Although I will say structurally, it's such an interesting structure that it does kind of keep you guessing the first time. This is one thing I want to put a pin in to talk about you with is that I actually enjoyed it more the second time because I wasn't having to sort of like figure out what we were doing with the structural conceit. Because I just, you know, we'll get into the way he sorts through all that, which is really so Nolan-esque in terms of, you know, telling a story non-linearly.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that jumps out to me at the movie about the movie is it Killian or Cillian? I
I
don't
think it's
actually know.
Killian. I mean,
I
it's
think you're right.
pronounced it's spelled with a C, but he's Irish.
I
So
think you're right. So Cillian Murphy does a really uniquely amazing job here. Sometimes sometimes I feel like I fall into this trap of like everyone sort of saying that visible acting is good acting, where you know you see an actor putting forth like a big performance, and you're like, wow, that was fun, that was some great acting. And I'm not saying that's wrong, because you know everybody enjoys Heath Ledger's Joker. That wasn't exactly subtle. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying the thing Cillian Murphy does in this movie is he disappears. I don't see
Mhm.
Cillian Murphy. I
Yeah.
see a picture of Robert Oppenheimer, and I'm like, oh, wait a second. Oh, that's the actor in the film playing Oppenheimer was not actually Robert Oppenheimer. He doesn't actually look like that. Like my brain just sees him as Robert Oppenheimer now,
Uh-huh.
in a way that I don't know if I've ever really done with a movie before.
Sure.
I thought he did a really remarkable job, and he deserves all the awards he's going to win.
Which he 100% is. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to take you back, because you probably remember this, but our listeners certainly don't. Like, the reason that we're sitting here right now talking into microphones is because I was having an existential crisis with Christopher Nolan
Uh-huh.
7-8 years ago, that I really did not
Yeah.
like the movie Interstellar, still do not really like the movie Interstellar. And I started to think, oh, maybe I just don't really like Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker anymore,
Uh-huh.
which like really kind of freaked me out, because I was like, no way, that can't be true, can it? And then I was like, oh, it might be true. And like the first podcast episode we did was a Deconstructing Nolan series. That was our old format, where we somehow managed to watch all those movies in 1 week
Uh-huh.
and then talked about all of them in an hour and a half episode. I don't know how we did that. Those are simpler times.
Yeah.
So like I bring this up only to say that I have a difficult relationship with Mr. Christopher Nolan. I did not like Tenet at all. And I liked what was the one he did, the World War II one he did. Can't even remember the name of it anymore.
It's named after the beach.
Yeah,
That's all I remember.
You're right. It is named after the beach.
Dunkirk.
Thank you. I enjoyed that movie. I loved this movie.
Yeah.
I think this is a fascinating thing to me, because in many ways this is like, I think this movie's going to win Best Picture. Like I'm pretty certain of it, and I think Christopher Nolan's going to win his first directing award for it, and well deserved, frankly. I think it's really interesting, because this is like the exact type of movie that always would win Best Picture, but it's also like uniquely and specifically a Christopher Nolan movie in like every way. Like no other director would make this story this way. Like the choices he made, and I think the structural ideas are the big part of it, like you said, and we'll get into the details of that. But like, this is so distinctly a Nolan film. And it is essentially a biopic, but it is what Christopher Nolan biopic would look like. And it is endlessly fascinating to me that this movie almost made $1 billion.
Yeah.
Like I just watching the movie is like, I understand why the Academy is going to love the shit out of this, and I understand why I love the shit out of this. I don't understand why $1 billion worth of people went to see this 3-hour story about Oppenheimer. Like it's certainly part of it is the whole Barbenheimer phenomenon, but like I feel like I understand it less than I did talking about Barbenheimer back in the summer, now that I've seen the movie, because it's a 3-hour movie that's just about guys talking about the atomic bomb. And what it means, and the like that's what it is.
Yeah.
And it's great. I love it to death. But like, how did people like this movie? It's just it's wild to me.
I mean, I think number one, people like World War II.
Mm-hmm.
They like they like movies about World War II, even if it's just talking about things. And also, I I I think this is one of the rare cases where the marketing hyperbole is actually accurate. Like Oppenheimer is a sort of mythological figure in American history.
Yeah.
He is the American Prometheus. It's not it's not a metaphor. It's like Prometheus brought fire from the gods. Oppenheimer brought the power of the sun to the surface of our world and built it into a weapon.
Hmm.
That shit is legendary. Like that, you don't need to exaggerate it. You don't need to make it into a science fiction. That is a science fiction premise.
Hmm.
It's an incredibly dramatic story. The only reason we don't recognize it as such is because we grew up just sort of knowing, like, yeah, there are bombs that can blow up cities. That's just a thing that we knew from some point in our childhood onward, right?
Yeah.
But it is an incredibly dramatic story that you know, World War II has ended with this um, weapon from hell. It's just an amazingly compelling idea, and I think people are naturally curious to know, you know, who was this character, and you know, the story is so dramatic that it actually kind of lives up to the
Yeah.
demands of a myth.
I agree, because I think one of the fair questions you can ask yourself at the end of this movie is still, who was this guy? Because like the one of the reasons I love the movie is because Nolan is not giving us any simple answers. You know, like there's many people that talk about Oppenheimer in this movie, and what he wanted and why he's doing the things he's doing. Many people. Very few of them are Oppenheimer himself, right? Like his wife supposes the reasons for his motivation. Robert Downey Jr.'s character does. Like, everyone's talking about like why Oppenheimer's doing this, how he feels, what he thinks, and we only get at the very, 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 very end of the movie that wonderful moment with Einstein that I just love to death. But like it just, like, the why of it all is the fascinating part, you know? Like, he's such a complicated person, and I think the movie really captures that complication perfectly. Like, this is a guy that, you know, was a rock star in the scientific community before he invented the bomb, and like he loved that, right? Like that's the part the movie shows, that he likes the attention, he likes women, he really likes women, um, and like he liked being this famous person. He wanted to be the person in charge of this, you know, to do it, but also to get love and admiration, and uh, that is layered with, you know, everything everything else about the consequences of building this thing. And I don't know, one of the things I really liked, Matt, is, you know, there's all this, I think that the Jurassic Park line, the famous line, is like, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. And like, it's a great line, great movie, but what we see in this movie is, no, they were thinking about whether they should the entire time they were making it.
Yeah.
They just always had a reason and an excuse, and like there's always, that's one thing I've learned in my 38 years on this planet. Like, there's always a reason to do anything, right? Like, if you work hard enough, you can find an excuse or a reason to justify any decision.
Yeah.
And I think this movie captures that pretty perfectly.
Yeah, I think so. I also, I think watching it twice enabled me to get a little bit more of a tighter read on at least what the movie is saying about the fictional character of Oppenheimer within the bounds of the story, if not necessarily the real Oppenheimer, because, you know, he's basically, you know, brilliant but naive is how he starts out the story. He really believes in the best in people. It takes him forever to catch on to the idea that like the FBI is monitoring him, because he is just like, he has this just like dilettante curiosity about communism as an intellectual idea. You know, which, you know, in the 30s and 40s, it's just like, oh yeah, this is interesting. We've got Freud, we've got Marx, we've got all these interesting ideas in the air. We've got quantum physics. Wow, what a fun and exciting world we live in. Of course, I'm curious about all of these things. Of course, I'll go to your labor union meeting or whatever. It sounds very interesting. And he doesn't realize the game that he's playing, because he's not playing a game. He's just like a curious person. Teaches himself Sanskrit for no reason, right?
For fun, yeah.
Just like this hungry mind, and then it turns out that his actions have consequences, and then because he is so smart, because he becomes so powerful, his actions have enormous consequences, and like it's almost like once he realizes the power that he has, he starts trying to backpedal, but it's too late. And specifically,
Yeah.
I mean, like when Teller keeps saying, like, yeah, we could build a hydrogen bomb, and like pretty much from the moment that's suggested, Oppenheimer is like, no, we don't need to do that. Let's focus on what's practical. And then later it's like, no, we don't need to do that, because if we do, then the Russians will just do that too. And it's like he's trying to um having built the atom bomb, he's trying to sort of put the genie back in the bottle, but it's too late, because now
Yeah.
the process has started. And I think he knows he can't stop it, but it's like he's desperately trying to undo this chain reaction, as he calls it, that
Mhm.
he has started.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I love the naivete of him. Like I think one of my favorite scenes, and this is another reason why Cillian Murphy should win this damn Oscar, and he's going to, is when he's trying to rat out the one guy without incriminating his friend.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is one of the brightest minds in the world, like the guy who invented the atomic bomb, and you're just listening to him like stutter and like awkwardly move through this thing with someone who is obviously so superior to him at this particular game. And it just completely like it just rips him down a peg. He seems like a silly little child in that
Yeah.
scene, and it's like wow, that Murphy can play all the facets of this character equally. I think it's just remarkable. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That he is capable of projecting this calm assurance and charisma that really makes you understand like why all these women would want him and why all these
Hmm.
men would want to work for him. But at the same time, this like kind of almost fragility, which the through line is like in the start of the movie, he's like on the edge of madness, essentially, just like he's just tormented by visions of a hidden world, and he tries to kill his tutor and
Yeah.
all this stuff, and then he kind of pulls himself together, and he becomes the legend. But it's like that kind of it, I don't know, instability is always under the surface, because that's how we started the
Yeah.
movie. We saw
Yeah.
that first.
And Nolan beautifully like just intermingles that throughout the entire movie. Like this the visions and the things that are happening in his head are we seeing as visual beats within the film, I think are just fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the structure a little bit, because it is really interesting, and I think it is like the perfect Nolan choice, as you said, to tell a story kind of out of order, out of time. That's a thing he's been doing from the very beginning, but it makes a lot of sense in this movie, and I think that's because Nolan correctly understands that every single person watching this movie knows that Oppenheimer creates the atomic bomb, right?
Right.
Like there's no stakes to the Trinity test. Like we know it works. Like we all know it's gonna work.
Yeah.
And yet he still manages to convey the scene, even though not only do we going into the theater know it works, but like even the movie has cut to the future where the bomb has already been developed and dropped, and we're seeing Oppenheimer later in his life. He still plays that scene as incredibly tense and wonderful. And I don't know, there's something special about that. But yeah, like
Yeah.
the way we cut through time and the way we're like just getting rid of the pretense that people don't already know maybe the just the basics of this overall story. I think it's just a masterstroke, and it I was glued. I was glued to the TV. I had to watch this movie over 3 nights, Matt,
Hmm.
because it's a 3-hour movie. I just don't have a lot of time in my evenings. My wife wanted to watch it with me too, and like the amount of time we have together to sit down and watch something is very limited. But man, like every time we had to stop it for the night, I was just so bummed.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, so to harken back to something you said at the start of this conversation about Nolan finally getting the award he deserves. To me, it's actually it's almost poignant, because it's like Nolan has spent his whole career preparing us for this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because even from Memento, using the concept of color for one timeline and black and white for another timeline, the way that he uses music and sort of subtle cinematographic cues to convey like, okay, now we're in this time, now this is where we are now we're in the future, now we're, sound cues, subtle things you don't even necessarily consciously notice that he's developed. On the one hand, he's been figuring it out as he goes. On the other hand, he's also been literally teaching the American movie-going public how to watch his movies. I think structurally, this movie is most similar to Inception in the sense that there are nested layers
Mhm.
of stakes, you could say,
Yeah.
because in one sense, there is a degree of stakes to the idea of like, is the bomb going to work? But we all know the bomb's going to work. But in the logic of the movie, the characters don't, and so there's some stakes there.
Yeah.
But then outside of that, there's like an exterior level of stakes, which has to do with like Oppenheimer's soul and Oppenheimer's reputation, and like the amazing thing is that it's people love this movie, and it's not even primarily a drama about the bomb. It's a drama about a hearing for the renewal of Oppenheimer's security clearance,
Yeah.
which is like the driest sounding thing imaginable, but it's turned into this like courtroom drama that has these tentacles that span through time and across all of these themes, and bring in all these characters, and just do it so deftly. And it's amazing that a person can watch this movie and not get lost really at any point. Like was there really any point when you were like, wait a second, are we in the past? That there was maybe like one moment when I was like, wait a minute, when is this relative to? And then I like figured it out pretty quickly. Usually I wasn't even asking the question. I was just like, it was obvious, which is
Yeah.
amazing actually.
I mean, he uses the different, like, he uses black and white and color to kind of, lampshade that a little bit. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah,
he indicates via color and style, like which layer of the story we're in. There were a few times where it like took me a few seconds entering a new scene to orient myself in where we are, but I think that's like intentional too. Like similar to the Memento character trying to orient themselves in time and memory. That is what Oppenheimer is doing. He's playing these things over in his head over and over and over again because he's processing this immense amount of guilt and responsibility he feels for this thing. You know, and the way that combines with all the other events of his life, that I think is told beautifully.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, there definitely were moments where I had to like take a beat and be like, okay, this is here at this point. Okay, got it. And just in my head, like stacking up the chronology, because the Robert Downey Jr. Strauss appointment to the cabinet is like not the latest we see in the movie, but like the second latest we see in the movie.
yeah,
And then the security clearance hearing occurs, I don't know if well before that, but before that. And then there's most of the in color version of the film is the
yeah,
events just in chronological, like starting at the beginning of Oppenheimer and working
yeah.
forward.
But then, I mean, there's exceptions to that. I mean, what you said is
Yes.
basically true. But then there's like straws relating the incident when Oppenheimer came to the Institute for Advanced Study, and then he went
Hmm.
out to the pond with Einstein. And it's like, well, when did like that happened? Sometime after the Manhattan Project, and sometime before the hearings,
Yeah.
and that's all you need to know. Like, and it's fine. The point here is only like he so deftly guides you through all these points where, I mean, if you literally saw like a timeline of the events depicted on the screen relative to like screen time, I'm sure it would be absolutely baffling, but the movie
Hmm.
just guides you through it without you ever really feeling that confused.
Yeah, in a way that fundamentally works, that the Tenet did not. Which obviously the timeline of the stuff is so much simpler than Tenet was. But that's why it's a better movie than Tenet is.
Yeah,
The thing that I find so interesting about this, Matt, is there are complaints I've levied against Nolan throughout my time with him, and I think they're valid complaints. I think oftentimes he writes characters kind of weirdly, especially like relationships, especially romantic relationships, love. like I've always felt like a coldness and a distance to those kind of things. Like he's writing about them as a person who doesn't necessarily know what they are.
Mhm.
And I've always found that like that works best in films where that kind of thing is part of the film.
Mhm.
Like why Memento is my favorite Nolan film is because that fundamentally works in that movie, because you're just so off kilter and confused about who these people are and why they're acting this way and all this stuff. It didn't work for me in a film like Interstellar, which almost like requires a very specific kind of humanity and warmth to it that I just felt was completely divorced from the film. Like I don't know, maybe I'm dead inside, but like um the moment where he's crying over realizing he's missed his entire daughter's life, Matthew McConaughey, I'm just like, I don't feel this at all, because you don't seem like a human to me, Matthew McConaughey. um and I think that's true in this film too, by the way, but I think that's part of why it works, oddly enough. Like so many of these characters, like Nolan is just so matter of factly about some of the relationship in this film. Like the relationship between Oppenheimer and Kitty is one of the most fascinating, confusing, like uh, things, and he just treats it so matter of factly. He's like, yeah, well, they met and she was married, but and then they got pregnant, and then like you just see her in the edges of the film in the background, and then she has that wonderful scene in the hearing, like the culmination of her character arc is how she just kicks ass in the hearing.
Yeah.
I just like it's such a like it's such a Nolan female character. Like it's vintage Nolan female character, but it works here. It does. And I'm fascinated by that whole thing, that like this is to the core of it a Christopher Nolan film, but all the things that drove me crazy about Christopher Nolan and all these past films, I'm like, no, that's great. Do it. Go.
Yeah. I mean, I think once again, Cillian Murphy's performance is able to convey subtlety and depth that really serves that kind of sort of contradictory, tortured character. Like you said, works best when it comes to a kind of weird, detached love story
Yeah.
where it's like it's you know he's constantly just having affairs with all these women, which in some sense is like, does he really care about them that much? And it's like, well, no, he does, because it like destroys him when the one woman kills herself. But it's like he can't help himself from doing it, from screwing around with them. And
Yeah.
that conflict, I think, comes across in his character. And I think you know I think some people are confused about why is there like the sexual element of this. And it's like, to me, that ties in with who he is as a character, where he's this guy who kind of can't help himself.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He again, he's like curious, and he's kind of impulsive, and if if he sees something to be conquered, he's going to try to do it. He has this like I don't know what to call it exactly. The word just like uncontrollable masculine urge to conquer comes to mind. And it always screws him over, and he always regrets it over and over.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's with the women that he breaks and leaves in his wake, and sometimes it's when he destroys several cities in Japan. But in either case, it's a statement about his character.
No, that is the crux of it. I think you're absolutely right that it is the sexual conquests of his is exactly the same drive that makes a man build the biggest bomb that's ever existed. Is that there's a thing over there, I want that thing, I'm gonna have that thing, I'm not even thinking about the consequences right now, even as everyone else around me is telling me about the consequences. I'm not thinking about them, but I'm always going to think about them after the fact. Like that is the unique thing about this character in this film, is that every time afterwards he's like, oh man, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
and he's it's not that he's devoid of empathy, it's just that you're absolutely right, his curiosity overwhelms his empathy, and it's not until that curiosity is sated that the effect of that choice really hits him, and it hits him deeply. He's like you could argue, at least, and again we were talking about the character Oppenheimer, not the person, because know nothing about the person, but the character is deeply empathetic, like deeply so. Like
Yeah.
he feels for the people that he's wronged, the consequences of his actions. Like he feels that, and he feels the great weight and responsibility of these things. He just doesn't feel it until after he does it.
Yeah.
He can't, he won't.
Yeah.
And that is, I think that is exactly what the entire relationship with the Florence Pugh character, I can't remember her name,
I think
the
it's
woman who kills herself,
I think it's Gene something. I'm not
Jean
sure.
Tadlock, that's what it is. Yeah, that, I think that depicts that perfectly, that he sees this woman and he cannot help himself. He cannot.
Yeah, and he goes back to her. I mean, that like technically he was with her before he met his wife, but then he can't say no, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm just like, well, why did you go to her? Well, she called me. She told me she needed me.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and he, you know, he thinks he's so smart. He thinks he can get out of any situation. This is even related to him, you know, thinking he can just like dip by the, you know, military intelligence office and be like, oh yeah, hey, I got like a lead for you. Don't ask any further questions. I'm gonna go by. And they're like, oh, I'd love to hear more about it. I'll schedule a meeting first thing in the morning. And he's like, shit. And like he really, like, I think part of it is that he thinks he's smarter than everyone, and while he is, he's not that much smarter than everyone.
There's different kinds of smarts, right?
Yeah,
I think that's one thing. Like he is, you know, theoretically, like he's really good at the theory, right? He's really good at looking at these things and seeing things the way no one's ever saw them before and piecing them together. But the
whole igniting the atmosphere thing. I think the first time I saw the first time I watched the movie, I kind of saw it as a joke almost, as it's like, yeah, this was a thing that they thought about. But here it's yet another one of these examples where it's like there's a risk that you'll destroy the world, as Matt Damon says, and we're just gonna try it and see, because he can't not. Like, what are we gonna just not try it and see? We have to.
And the entire idea that Matt Damon's character is learning this fact like 30 seconds before they're about to ignite the bomb is the most insane thing in the world. And it's great. It's great because it is exactly that. It is, well, we're just going to do it. And one thing I love, you know, the US government, not depicted too great in this movie. Doesn't come out too clean in this film.
It's true.
But one of the things I love about it is, you know, we see all the people like weighing the moral responsibilities of this weapon. But all those people are the scientists.
Mm-hmm.
No one in the government or military ever shows any kind of doubt or any kind of assumption that we're not going to use this thing, right? Like it's a foregone conclusion for anyone in the military and the government that we're building this thing, we're gonna use it, absolutely. None of those people are having any of the moral and like the way Nolan paints the absurdity of this. I think one of my favorite parts is, I think it was the Secretary of War that's just like, okay, here's the 12 targets, well, 11, we're not going to go to Kyoto because that's where me and my wife went on a honeymoon. Like the random divorced like absurdity of it all. It's just like, you're talking about people, thousands of people.
And you know that's true, right?
I didn't actually, but that's great.
That happened, and like I think it was brilliant to include it there because it's like it's so absurd that it's almost stranger than fiction, right? It's like we for the cultural importance of Japan. Because I have a personal experience related to that city, we're not going to destroy that city, but all these other cities, we can destroy it. It's totally insane. But that, and you know, he's in the room and he's like, once again, you know, trying to backpedal way after the cow has left the barn or whatever the expression is. The horse, I guess, the horse has left the barn. It's fitting for this movie. There's so many horses in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you said about like, he always regrets it later. I think like my favorite sort of short sort of sequence of the movie is basically the time between, you know, the build up to and detonation of the bomb, and then sort of the speech he gives in the auditorium shortly after, where it's I think the most very unusual stuff for Nolan specifically, I guess is what I'll say, because he tends to be sort of. I think when we've talked about the Batman movies in the past, we've talked about how they're just like so sterile and like visually lacking in like communicating the like you want them to be kind of more bombastic. Like you want to bring in some of that like Tim Burton-esque like hyper reality into
Uh-huh.
Batman, and Nolan usually refuses to do that in like any movie. But here in the sequence where he's giving the speech in the auditorium, it's this incredibly intense like again, all he's doing is giving a speech in a room
Yeah.
with people, and like the sound
Oh
of,
my
of
god.
the pounding of the feet on the
Oh my god.
bleachers, which is a sound cue that occurs throughout the movie, whether you
Yep.
realize that's what you're hearing or not.
Yep.
um and the fact that like while he's giving the speech, the sound just abruptly cuts and goes silent, and you just hear like a woman's voice screaming, and the torture on his face as he's trying to like manage this emotional experience that he's having
Yeah.
while giving a speech.
Well, and just like the way everything, like I've given Nolan shit for his sound before, and by the way, I still do think the dialogue is mixed a little low in this film.
uh
Um, but yeah, the choices to cut in and out of the layers of sound in that sequence are brilliant. Like, because it's not just that he's dumping all sound, right? Like he's dumping specific sounds. Like there's a moment in the scene where like the screaming is gone. Like we don't hear the crowd noises, but we are hearing the bodies move and shuffle still.
yeah.
And that's such a fascinating choice. And it just paints the pain and anguish in Oppenheimer perfectly. And we get to see these people and they're almost animalistic and they're like screaming and celebrating this horrible event. Yeah, the great. I loved everything about that sequence. That sequence alone was like, yes, best picture, best director, go,
Yeah.
fine, do it.
Yeah, and that's why I mention it. There's also he's doing some really dramatic things with the camera there, close ups,
Mhm.
and playing with
Yeah.
focus, and just really stepping out relative to his normal
Yeah.
sort of very like squared off, almost emotionless way of shooting things.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that I don't
I
know,
mean,
like
just
just
just the just the ways in like there's so much of this film is close-ups of Oppenheimer, right?
mhm,
Like and the way he composes those frames and the angles we see him at and the way Cillian Murphy's makeup is done and the lighting on him just like paints the anguish and the torture on this guy. Like it makes him seem like in the hearing in those moments in the hearing, like you feel bad for him almost
yeah,
sometimes, you know?
sure. Yeah, I mean, sure. Um I have no trouble empathizing with the character of Oppenheimer in the movie,
Yeah.
even though he's a complicated figure that we're supposed
Yeah.
to have complicated feelings about. I mean, I I think the most that the movie sort of directly lampshades this is when his wife is like, um, that they're not going to forgive you just because you let them torture you or something like
Mhm.
that, and he just goes, we'll see.
Yeah.
And to me it was a bigger statement than just in the moment. It was like, you know do we forgive this, you know
Yeah.
do we forgive Prometheus for bringing us fire?
Yeah.
It's complicated.
It is complicated because yeah, I mean, we haven't talked at like Oppenheimer was Jewish, right? And so at least a little bit of his motivation for this whole thing was to stop Hitler, right? Like
Hmm.
like we have to do whatever we can to stop this guy. And yeah, I mean, this movie goes through all the most popular excuses for why we needed to drop the bomb. We've heard before, right? That like, well, the Japanese were never going to surrender. What? How many men would we lose invading the main islands of Japan? And we've heard all these arguments before, right? And like I said, there's always a reason for everything. If you want to do something, that you'll find a good sounding reason to do it. But yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think one thing the movie says that I really liked was the idea of like, Oppenheimer is remembered for Trinity, but it's everyone else that's remembered for Hiroshima and
Hmm.
Nagasaki, which is like, and Robert Downey Jr. paints that as like a thing that Oppenheimer was like in his clever ways of playing the game is trying to maneuver and manipulate people too, right? Whereas I think the reality is just he just wanted to do whatever he could to absolve himself to forgive himself
Yeah.
or and try to get forgiveness. Like,
Try to get forgiveness and maybe literally like not in the world, because
yeah,
like
right, yes,
just to take that last bit of the movie seriously, it's like that, again, that event when he had that conversation with Einstein, and he says, just amazing ending to a movie.
hmm,
Remember when we thought we might start a chain reaction that will end the world? I think we did. Bam, end of the movie. Oh my
yeah,
god, leaves you
yeah,
walking, like staggering out of the theater. And that's what he's trying to avert for the
yeah,
rest of his life, basically. And I mean, I think at least within the frame of the movie, I kind of just accept that, because he spends all of his time like trying to sway public opinion toward nuclear regulation
hmm,
and non-proliferation, and trying to stand down the conflict with the Russians so that we don't build up these giant arsenals. And he's like not successful with like any of it, but at least the movie portrays him as earnestly trying
yeah.
to get people to not continue walking toward doom this way.
Yeah. No, I love that because yeah, the Robert Downey Jr. take on this is just he's trying to absolve himself of responsibility, and actually what the movie is I think saying is actually no, this is him taking responsibility. This
Mhm.
is it, like I did this. I need to do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't get worse than it is now. And yeah, he fails. He fails constantly and entirely. It is like I think my favorite quote from the Hardcore History episode on atomic weapons, by the way, is I think when Dan Carlin says like we've basically been running an experiment of whether a society with atomic weapons like this will destroy itself since 1947 or 46, and
Yeah.
like so far so good, right? Like it is actually, when you think about it, kind of incredible that two of these things were detonated ever and
Yeah.
then never again. Like
Yeah.
it's like I think it says something about humanity, maybe that we managed to not kill ourselves for the last 60 years. Go us. 80 years, my god.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we get like partial credit because it's like I I think the movie successfully made me feel things that I had never felt before, but which I think every living person ought to feel viscerally. Like the moment where somebody describes the V2 rockets to him. I'm sure this didn't happen this way, by the way,
Mhm.
in real life, but it's like dramatized as like, hey Oppie, did it ever occur to you, like for you right now, this is a giant bomb the size of a Humvee that needs to be dropped from a big airplane that's flying super high up in the sky, and it's very hard to build even one of them, and it can basically knock down a bunch of buildings in a downtown area. That's about the scope of what you're prepared to think about. And then suddenly you realize, no, these are going to be 1,000 times more powerful. There's going to be 13,000 of them, and they're going
Mhm.
to be launched on independent rockets that just target every major city in the world. And
Mhm.
that's just how things are going to be for the next 80 years. And you're just like you feel sick, like
Yeah.
vicariously for the character in the scene, because he's like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
what did we do? Like
Yeah.
that's not what I thought I was doing when I built the A-bomb at Trinity,
Yeah.
um
Right. I think that is important because, basically everyone that is alive today, more or less, has lived in a world in which these things just existed, right? Like, and because of that, we kind of forget how horrible and powerful and terrifying these things are because we've just lived with them our entire lives. And yeah, it's good to be reminded that hey, this is really bad actually, and we're just like a hair trigger away from killing ourselves. And like I think this movie serves to reignite that idea. Like I think there's a lot of people, $1 billion worth of people that went out and watched this movie and now we're like, oh man, isn't this is bad. Isn't this bad? Like, I think it is good. I think we have the world has kind of stepped down our production of these weapons, certainly since the Cold War times, right? But
Yeah.
God, they're so much more powerful now. As you said, the delivery systems for these things completely independent. It's terrifying. The whole thing is terrifying.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the guy who created them didn't seem to consider that possibility in the slightest when he was doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, I think it's a complicated conversation to have, because I'm about to say, well, it didn't have to be Oppie. Somebody else could have done it. And a certain number of people will hear that as me like excusing or absolving or whatever. And it's like, no, it's just true. It's just true that the atom bomb would have been built whether or not J. Robert Oppenheimer was ever born. It was in fact an obvious idea. I mean, the movie even makes the point, within the film, that like every physicist above a certain level of knowledge about particle physics and quantum physics and so forth is just immediately going to think about the possibility of a bomb the moment they saw the result that you could split the atom.
And he didn't even do it. That's the thing that like was wild to me, that it wasn't like Oppenheimer that like ran the experiment. It was like, oh, whoa, it was someone else. He's just like the guy that made that breakthrough lead to the actual building of the thing.
I mean, I think that it's actually really interesting, because while obviously he is a scientist, his role is as an administrator. I mean, he's a knowledgeable administrator. He understands all of the details of every part of the thing that is being built, but he's fundamentally coordinating a lot of, scientists and engineers and the supply chain and all this other stuff. He's not like sitting down with a pen and paper and doing physics equations.
Yeah.
And like, that's, I don't quite know what to make of that, but I do think it's interesting that it's like, it's almost, yeah.
I mean, just in fact, like at least in the story of the movie, like when they heard of this great accomplishment, his reaction was, "No, that's not possible."
Yeah.
And then it's someone else that runs to the radiology lab and is like, "No, I did it. It works. Yep, it works this way. Yep." Yeah, which is really interesting, because you always hear like father of the atomic bomb, and you're like, oh, this is the guy that like invented the method of doing this. And yes, right, like like I think he was the guy. Like he was the guy in charge. He put the teams together. He made the assignments. He administered the thing. But yeah, like it was a very different depiction than I thought of in my head.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's interesting. I wonder like how historically faithful the movie is, because in places it's super, super faithful. And then in some places it's like you would think taking liberties.
Sure.
But I don't know, like little details like Richard Feynman being like, no, I don't need the glasses. The car windshield will protect me from the UV. That's true. That happened. He did that. And it feels like such a Hollywood script note of being like, the kind of thing these wacky physicists would get up to. It's like, no, that totally happened. There's a lot of these little moments where it's like, yeah, well, the reason this is in the movie is this really happened. And it just happens to be ridiculously dramatic also, to the point where you almost don't believe it, which is interesting.
Can we talk a little bit about the Trinity test sequence?
Yeah.
Arguably like the climax of the movie, although I mean obviously there's a lot of movie afterwards, but the movie definitely shifts from that point to really like it's always the structure has always been the Strauss hearings and then also the security hearing that Oppenheimer is going under, but like post Trinity it really shifts to being just entirely that. So you could say this is the climax of a certain part of the movie, I guess.
Totally.
It is one of the most masterfully directed sequences I've ever witnessed. Like I'm being hyperbolic here, but only a little bit. Everything about this thing like works, and the thing that I think is remarkable about it is, you have all this tension leading up to this thing that if you, the viewers, take a step back and realize that of course this thing works. There's no tension here. It's going to work perfectly. Of course it is. But you're so sucked into the moment and everyone, and just you're cutting back and forth between the different people. And the thing that got me was there's a moment in the middle of this thing when it's exploding and he does, the difference between seeing the mushroom cloud and then the boom of the actual sound of the bomb hitting
Mhm.
people, which is just great.
Yeah.
But like, you, the viewer, are awed by it too.
Yeah.
You, the viewer, are blown away. You, the viewer, are like, wow, this is amazing. Look at this thing that we did. That's incredible. We built a thing that can do that. Isn't that incredible? And then, like, in the back of your mind, maybe there's that party that's like, wait. This is bad though.
Yeah.
This is actually bad. It's not good that we did this. But yeah, it is like the I'm not a scientist, but I'm endlessly fascinated by these things. And it's like, isn't it incredible that we did that? That we found a way to do that. And the movie has so much. I'm going off a tangent now, but like the part where Oppenheimer basically theorizes black holes before anyone's seen any black holes. That's cool, right?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, we did the math, and there should be these things out here that have such a gravitational pull that they even suck in light. We've never seen them, but math says they're out there. Maybe we'll find them one day. And me, the viewer's like, we will find them one day. We
Yeah.
will. They're out. You were right. They're out there. And that's part of this too. Is this mixture of like, this technology was incredible that we figured out how to do this thing. Also, it's horrifying and
Yeah.
terrible and the worst thing we've ever done.
Right. I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome
Yeah.
in the sense of inspiring awe and
Yeah.
terror also. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with experiencing pure awe
Mm-hmm.
in response to the atomic bomb. I mean, it's I think I've said this before somewhere, but like it's a thing right out of like the Cthulhu mythos or something, where it's like, if you didn't already know that, like, if I get enough of a certain kind of rock and I pile them in a big enough pile, it'll create a devastating city destroying explosion, then that would sound made up, and it would sound like magic. It would sound like, no, that can't possibly be, like, the world can't be built that way. The world, this world that we live in, it just flies in the face of everything we think we understand about our world and the rules that we operate within. And it's like, no, everything is much weirder and more sort of deeply terrifying than you realized.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I mean, I actually do appreciate that the movie like gets into the science of fission like a little bit.
Mhm.
Like I asked my wife before, I was like, do you know how atom bombs work? She's like,
Mhm.
no, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. And I think that's probably most people, right? Like, we're weird. So I did, and of course you did as well.
Yeah.
But it gets into the just, I mean, not too complex, but it gets into the idea, it gets into the how it works and the chain reaction and all these things, and just enough, right? Just
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. I mean, there's even, they get drama out of it too. I assume this happened too, where the detonator lenses fail in the test, and then the guy who's responsible for it is like, just do it.
I just got a good feeling.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I got a good feeling about it. I'll bet you a month of my salary. And like Oppenheimer's like, a month of your salary isn't going to be worth jack shit if we spray, $1 billion worth of uranium across the desert. He doesn't say this, but like you can see him thinking it.
Yeah.
But he's like, okay, fine, let's do it. And like, that's dramatic. And it all relies on this idea that you kind of have to understand the idea of what these explosive lenses are, where it's like, yeah, you build bombs in a shape that crushes the uranium or plutonium. I actually forget which one they're using for the
Trinity
first test.
I don't know. Yeah.
In either case, like, you get it. I mean, the movie's very clever about doing things visually, where it doesn't even have to explain a lot of this stuff. It's just like you see them testing it, and then you see that they're using it to surround the bomb, and you're like, oh, I get it. They're going to crush the fissile fuel, and then that's how it works. And then they also explain, very briefly in the briefest possible terms, like, yeah, to start a hydrogen bomb, you need to, crush the hydrogen with a fission bomb, which sounds ridiculous, but that's how a hydrogen bomb works. I mean, yeah, it's just speaking of people not knowing about these things, like, yeah, I think probably most people don't know that there's a difference between a fission and a fusion bomb, and that the fusion bombs are like orders of magnitude more powerful.
Yeah.
And like people don't know how scared they should be because since the 50s we stopped, routinely terrifying everyone with this information.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean that was a part of the fun of this movie too, coming from me, because when that one guy's like, "If you ask me, you should be using hydrogen," and I like turned to my wife and was like, "Oh," because I know what that means, and
Yeah.
she's like, "What?" I was like, "No, that's fusion. That's fusion.
Yeah.
He's talking about fusion. Don't you get it?" No, but it still works. It works dramatically. Like I think it's all very, very smartly done, in a way that obviously doesn't alienate the audience too much, because the audience turned out and then loved the shit out of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think the thing is, like you just said, you can just sort of that beat can just pass you by, and it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm confused now. It's like, no, like all that matters is the one nerd guy said a thing and everybody else didn't want to do the thing. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you did get it, then great. You know, maybe you know who Teller is already, and then there's like different levels on which you can appreciate the movie, right?
Yeah.
That's actually really hard to do, right? Like it would be one thing if it was like the only way to talk about the movie was like, well, you have to have read 7 biographies first. It's like, no, it doesn't really demand much of you. It sort of tries to teach you, but also you can just watch it and be entertained, and that's fine.
No, that's a great point, because like I don't know the name of any fucking person in this movie besides J. Robert Oppenheimer. Any of the scientists. These are some of the Einstein. I know Einstein. These are some of the most brilliant minds of their day. All of them are really well-known names, and I don't know any of them because that's not a thing I know. And the movie does not require you to know that at all. Like that's not, as you said, that's not Teller. That's just the one guy that's always kind of riding him about how he's wasted time with this thing and should be doing this other thing, and then betrays him at the end. It doesn't matter. It's like Nolan, he's so smartly recognized that the who these people are as characters matters so much more than who they are in history, and we'll put them there like they were there, but like you don't need to spend time knowing who any of these people are.
Yeah, right. There's a certain class of science fan who is just like, it's Feynman, he's got the bongos, it's Feynman, and like cares a lot that Feynman is in the movie, and that's the character Jack Quaid plays, by the way. That's
okay.
the name that I was trying to say earlier, and it's like, it's so unimportant to the movie, like, but it really makes a certain type of viewer happy, right? So and it was smart to do it that way. It was smart to leave that as a background element. You can take it or leave it, and he does that kind of thing a lot, and it's a clever way to do a thing like this, where it actually, fundamentally, it's a slow, boring biopic about a hearing that he turns into this riveting character drama that is also like about the soul of America and like the weightiest themes imaginable.
Yeah.
It's just great. It's just great.
I think that, there's a couple things I want to talk about with that is, we haven't talked about the Robert Downey Jr. character too much, who I love. I think Downey is going to win supporting Oscar for this, which would be wonderful. I think he's really, really good in this movie. And it just like strikes me like Nolan's intent and messaging here is very clear at times, which is that like the people that are in charge of making some of the most important decisions in a world are often feckless idiots. And you have Robert Downey Jr., who is this incredibly powerful, playing Strauss, this incredibly powerful, influential person in the United States government. And he's driven by, he walked by Einstein, and Einstein had a shitty look on his face, and he assumed that it meant that Oppenheimer had been talking some shit about him. And every decision he made from then on out was motivated by this. It reminds me of this old thing, like the stupid misogynistic argument that people say that like, oh, women can't be leaders because they're too emotional, like they can't make the rational decisions in a crisis moment. And I'm like, look at the fucking people that are in charge of this shit. You have this guy who's completely driven by just this incorrect perception of a conversation.
Mhm.
And it's just like, these people suck.
Yeah.
And we're the ones, the scientists make these things and they give them to these people. Like one of I loved that moment, when Oppenheimer finishes the bomb and then that US government official is packing them up in crates and he's trying to tell them things about like, launch altitude and like all these other things. And the US government representative is just like, we've got it from here, Oppie. And it's just like, fuck.
Yeah, right. It's almost like, it's a delightful, almost like anticlimax where it's like he's watching somebody drive away with his kid.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, no, I thought, oh shit,
drive away incredibly recklessly and did not put their seatbelts on.
That's great.
Yeah.
So one thing you were talking about, Strauss and his vindictiveness, and on the second viewing, I came even more strongly to feel like it was yes, it was about him thinking that he had soured Einstein on him, as he says, but like it was maybe even more about just the offhand. He used to be a lowly shoe salesman. and then you see Downey Jr.'s whole aspect change permanently for the entire rest of the movie, where he just goes, well, a shoe salesman, yes. And it's like his desire to impress this guy seems to go away in that instant. And it's just, and then it just becomes about like, well, now I need him to come work for me, because then he'll work for me. And it's just like, it's more about the fact that he disrespected him for a nanosecond than like whatever with Einstein. I love that. Like, again, like that's the kind of thing where I'm just kind of not used to that kind of subtlety in a Nolan film.
Certainly. Yeah.
And it all swings on Downey Jr.'s ability to subtly convey these. Like, Downey Jr. is great. Like, no surprise to hear that from us. I think this is some of the best of his work that I can remember.
He's so good at a very specific thing, and it's like he got cast in this movie and Nolan was like, okay, but you can't do that thing. I need you to do something else. And he just nails it. Like he has so much energy and fast talking, like quippiness. Like he basically the entire structure, tone wise of the MCU was built around not even really Tony Stark, but just Robert Downey Jr. Right. And he's so good at it. And it's like, you can't really do that in this movie. Like, you have to do something else. And he nails it. He nails it.
I mean, I can't think of another movie where he's a villain, and he's just the villain of this movie.
Yeah.
This whole movie is about you hating this character, and he's pretty consistently been like leading man hero, and I literally can't think of an exception.
I'm sure there's some, but yeah, I think the majority of his career, I think you're absolutely right, especially lately.
Yeah. So that was, I mean, that's almost like a daring call to be like, what I want to see in this, hateable character is that kind of energy, because I think that'll work. It's like, wow, that's bold, to cast, this guy who everybody sees as the hero, as the villain of your movie. I mean, it's not a crazy thought, but I guess I'm just impressed that it works so well. It's just like a really great casting choice to me.
I agree. I totally agree. One thing I did want to talk about before we wrap up is, one of the big critiques of this movie I saw, obviously well before I saw the movie itself, I was reading about this online, was the choice Nolan makes to basically not show any of the victims of the bomb. Like we don't see the detonation at Nagasaki or
Hiroshima.
Thank you, Hiroshima. I don't know why I just blanked on that. We don't see the detonation there. There's moments where Oppenheimer is watching the effects of the bomb on TV, but Nolan doesn't let us see the TV. He just stays on Oppenheimer. And like, there's part of me that after seeing the movie understands those critiques, that like, we've just shut the victims of the horrible thing that happened out of the movie. But on the other hand, the choice that was made to not show Hiroshima or Nagasaki I think was one of the most brilliant choices in the movie. That, you know, like we said, the moment that they have the successful Trinity test, they've done it. They build the other 2 bombs. They've done it. They've won. They've accomplished everything. Everyone's celebrating, and then the U.S. government swoops in, takes him, and leaves. And Oppenheimer isn't even invited in the room anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like he finds out about the successful bombing from the radio,
Yeah.
like with everyone else.
Right.
And that was such a great, and maybe that's true, maybe that's how it happened, I don't know, but such a great, you know, directorial decision there to just really cement how far removed from the consequences of the thing Oppenheimer was. That
Yeah.
like he's not involved, like he's involved in everything up to it, but the actual event, he's so far removed from it that he hears about it on the radio. He doesn't get to see it, and therefore we don't get to see it. I think that was the correct and brilliant choice.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's lots of reasons to do it this way. I mean, one of which is just like if you had showed the bombing itself, then you're basically turning this thing, which you're really trying to convey as being just this horrific thing, into spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes of the same nature as the alien ships blowing up all the cities in Independence Day.
Sure.
Where you're basically like, you know, part of your brain is like, oh no, but part of your brain is like, this is really cool, and because it's gonna look really cool, like that's the screwed up thing. Like much like it's impossible to make people properly despise dictators because we have this like human status impulse. It's also impossible to make them viscerally appreciate the horror of a giant explosion because giant explosions look cool.
Yeah, mushroom clouds look cool.
Mushroom clouds look cool, and then if you had like that basically leaves you with the option of like, well, you could have shown the aftermath of the explosion, and I mean, all you can really say there is like that's not what the movie was.
Yeah,
you know, you see Oppenheimer reacting to like a slideshow of images, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is really what the movie's about. It's about this man and his his struggle with this thing that he's done. And I think the movie just becomes really unfocused if you try to make it as sort of like maudlin, like it's not about like cataloging guilt in the abstract. It's about this specific man's guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why it's called Oppenheimer and not the bomb or something.
I agree. Seeing his reaction is more important than seeing what he's reacted to. Yeah. I mean, I do think a lot of these critiques come from a place of like, you know, there's so many movies out here about this particular thing, and it doesn't seem like, and I say our story, not meaning me, but the people who actually had to live through this thing gets told very often. And I think that's a fair critique. I also think we need to stop like trying to make every movie be about everything. Like it's okay for this to be, I wanted to make this particular story about this man, and I wanted the focus of my movie to be this man, and so that portion of it just doesn't fit within the story I want to tell. Someone else should come along and tell that story. I agree, we should. I think I have never personally seen, and there's many, I think many Japanese films out there exploring like really getting into the aftermath of what this was like and what happened and the horrific monstrosity of it all. And those movies should be made and seen, certainly, but this is not the movie Nolan wanted to make, and so we shouldn't that shouldn't be an expectation, you know.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I mean, if you actually listen to every critic who says like, oh well, you didn't address this, it's like, well, that's not the story. Like movies are not just vehicles for addressing all human grievances. Like that's just not a way that you should be thinking about art, frankly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and it's like, I think we talked about this, you know, way back when we talked about Nolan originally, but it's like, you know, one of the constant critiques of Nolan is that he doesn't write very good female characters, or when he doesn't write them at all. Often that his movies are mostly male driven, and then when he does write them, they're not very good. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, but like, what do you want him to do? So if he's really bad at writing women, do you want him to keep writing women?
Yeah. Yeah, he's gonna
He's
get
not
yelled at
good
either
at
way.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
let's have some women write some movies about women, and I bet they'll be better. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I don't know. Like it's just I go back and forth because I'm like, yeah, I wish in some of these other Nolan movies the women are just written a little bit better, but at the same time it's like, well, I didn't put any in at all, and you yelled at me, so I tried to put some in, and I did a bad job at it. So I don't know. Yeah, I go back and forth on this stuff because yeah, I mean I think things matter, but also let people tell the stories they want to tell.
yeah,
And
right.
this is the story that Nolan wanted to tell. I think maybe closing on that is like, do you think Nolan sees? I mean, this is certainly like uh, autobiographical in some sense, right? Like, okay, no, Nolan did not invent an atomic bomb, but he is like this kind of eccentric genius of his craft. I think there's some parallels we can draw between the character and the director.
Yeah, I didn't really think much about that. I think you're right. I mean, do you have a thesis statement here? Because I haven't really put much thought into this idea.
Not anything specific, but just like basically what happened with this movie is someone sent Nolan the book, right, and he read the book and was immediately fascinated by it and was like, yes, got to make a movie out of this. And I think it's just he's this guy that this complex genius, and the complex nature of him was probably just something that he really got on board for. Like whether he consciously identified with Oppenheimer or not, I think it feels like there's some of that in there.
Yeah.
Like um it, it feels like so reductionist to be like, yes, this genius of coming up with these movies and this misunderstood genius and blah blah. Like when comparing that to someone who made a bomb that killed thousands and thousands of people. Like I don't mean to minimize that, but I do think that you have this the one man syndrome that is the myth of Oppenheimer, and the auteur theory with Christopher Nolan being kind of the most commercially successful auteurist of our
Mhm.
day. I think there's some parallel there. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I think you're right. I was thinking earlier about like the 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 reasons you haven't liked a lot of his movies is like because he has a vaguely Oppenheimer like tendency to, to
Yes.
to like make the most intricate clockwork puzzle of a film that he possibly can, and in a lot of ways that can end up being frustrating and inaccessible to 99% of people. And even the people who do appreciate the movie are like, yeah, I mean, I see what he was trying to do, but also I I understand your issues.
Yeah.
We've talked about like we've talked about these issues a
Yeah.
lot. Like they're the the complexity of a story like Tenet or I mean basically any movie he's done that wasn't a Batman movie was some kind of like incredibly clockwork like multiple interweaving threads in both time and space and theme and um you know aiming for some kind of transcendent crescendo that maybe he doesn't quite nail, but you kind of appreciate that he tried usually,
Yeah. No, this is perfect. He's so preoccupied with making this incredibly intricate, confusing, never seen before thing that he loses the core of the people in it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this honestly, this is my big complaint with Nolan times, that like he's so interested in doing these really weird, fascinating, difficult things that I feel like sometimes just like the basics of storytelling and character just get lost in this complex structural conceit or stylistic conceit or all these things that like the consequences on the
Yeah.
people get lost in that,
Right.
because I just wanted to see if I could do it. And oh yeah, I have to tell a story with this. Oh, um, yeah, dead wife.
Yeah, dead wife, and yeah, like that's the I think I don't actually remember your exact feelings about Inception, but like to me that's the perfect example of like um at the level of character um it leaves me a little cold, but like
Yeah.
it all comes together so well in every other way that I
Yep.
don't really care.
Yeah.
Like, I still love the movie regardless.
And Inception, like I feel like every Nolan movie that I like, I think there's like a valid excuse for why the characters leave me completely cold. And it's like, well, in this movie, it's because they were in a dream the entire time, and dream logic doesn't support story logic, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
But
right.
in Memento, well, it's he doesn't remember, so that's why he's acting like this weird non-human.
Yeah, I mean, so think like even just the minor element of leaving the top spinning at the end of Inception is simultaneously like incredibly memorable, all-time great movie ending, and also totally distracts you from like
the emotional moment that's happening.
Exactly. Like so everybody walks out of that movie going, what does that mean? Does that mean he's still in the blah 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 blah? And it's like totally pulled the rug out from under whatever the emotional stakes were, and he couldn't help himself is the thing. Like I'm sure once he had the idea of like, oh, and we could leave it and then we could just cut to black, and it's like, yeah, we have to do that. We have to do that. There's no other choice. And it's like, well, you realize the trade-off. And I think he's just like, I have to do that.
Yep. The spinning top is Nolan's atomic bomb.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
I love this. This is great. Yeah. And so it does interest me how well this works here, because I feel like it just works because we talked about this already, but like Oppenheimer is such a weird dude that like the abnormal behavior and the coldness and the distance just seem to work for me. Like characters just pop into this thing. Who's that? I don't know. Just some guy, and he's talking to Oppie now. Okay. And it just like the flow of this movie is so strange to me, but in a way that just it functions. It really does.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
All right. Anything else you wanted to say about Oppenheimer?
Nope.
Okay. That was Oppenheimer. I think, Matt, we're gonna move from a 3-hour epic to next week a 3.5-hour epic, because Killers of the Flower Moon is our next movie. Once again, not 100% sure it will be nominated for Best Picture, but like, come on, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, people are saying good stuff about it. So
yeah, excited to watch that one as well. So that'll be next week. If you haven't seen it yet, it's available to rent for like $20 on streaming platforms. But starting tomorrow, if you have Apple TV Plus, it will be on there for whatever your subscription fee is. So by tomorrow, I mean the 12th of January. Sorry, I forget we exist in the past.
Right.
Do. Doof. All right, Matt. Before we go, I wanted to very quickly talk to you about the Golden Globes. The 81st annual Golden Globe Awards were Sunday, and dear Lord,
hit me. I have no idea. By the way, I know no information about this.
So the biggest, I think, conversation. I think overall they were pretty unsurprising as an award show. Like the actual like winners, pretty unsurprising. Like Oppenheimer, like cleaned up. Like Oppenheimer via the Golden Globes became the clear Oscar favorite if it wasn't there already. Like I am pretty convinced that this movie is just going to win most of the awards it's nominated for, Oscars wise. And there's some, I think all the wins were wins that were pretty expected for the big movie things. But the show itself, the production of the show was real bad. It was real bad. And it all started with the opening monologue by the host, which was a comedian named Joe Coy. He got the gig like 2 weeks ago because nobody wants hosting gigs at award shows because it's really hard. And if you do a good job, no one talks about you. And if you do a bad job, it's all people can talk about.
Yeah.
And guess what, Matt?
He did a bad job.
He bombed so hard. I have never in my life seen a comedian bomb on like a nationally televised award show to the level that he bombed on this show. It was bad. And he was like, he's doing all the things that comedians do when they realize they're bombing, which he starts getting really aggressive with the audience, which is not a good thing to do. he did this thing where he started blaming the writers
Uh-huh.
that wrote the jokes, because the comedian doesn't write all the jokes. He has
Right.
a writers team, which is also a terrible thing to
Yeah.
do. In a year that there was a writer strike, some of people's first paid gigs were
Ugh.
writing jokes for this.
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Yeah, blame. It's not my fault. I didn't write these." It's like, yeah, great. I mean, he was just desperately grasping for things because he was bombing and he knew he was bombing.
Yeah.
I almost feel bad for him because the entire dialogue coming out of this thing was how fucking bad this guy did. And this is why nobody wants to sign up and do these things, Matt. They're just like often like the you have to be a certain type of comedian to get away with the treating of the award show as a roast thing.
Uh-huh.
Like there are certain comedians that can do that, and it's usually because they're pretty well known in the industry. But like it's always this conflict of you're really kind of playing to the TV audience, but the people in the room are the famous people. And so like if you treat them like shit to make the people watching at home laugh, you're just gonna piss off everyone in the room. And he was doing that in like some of the jokes were just bad. Like the first joke was a joke about how long Killers of the Flower Moon was, or maybe how long Oppenheimer was.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, yeah, everyone knows these movies are long,
Yeah.
but like the people there or the people actually watching the award show at home don't care about that because they like movies.
Yeah.
So, dude, it was painful. I felt
I-
so bad for him. I felt so bad.
Yeah, I mean, to be totally honest, like I think a big part of why I don't watch these award shows is at a certain point when I became overly sensitized to cringe, I realized that some of these comedians do see it as an opportunity to just roast the audience, and like so a successful roast is a little bit cringe. A failed roast is even more cringe because you're cringing for the comedian now. Yeah. And so that just sounds like hell. So like I actively don't want to watch that kind of thing. Yeah. And I wish award shows would sort of like pull back on that. I mean, unless your name is Bill Burr, you have no business roasting the audience, first of all.
Yeah. So Ricky Gervais has hosted the Golden Globes many times, and he's kind of infamous for, just taking the people in the audience to task. But like Ricky Gervais is also like a very, very well-known comedian who like people know him for that. People know him, the type of comedian that he's branded himself as like, I don't care what people think about me and I'm going to say whatever I want to say. And he's really leaned into that, especially these last few years. But like he was well known. And so normally the audience would like go along with it. The problem with this guy is no one had ever really heard of him. He's not a super well known. I mean, he has a successful career. I don't want to, take that, but
he's not Ricky Gervais. Yeah,
no, he's not. And so you could get the feeling in the audience that even after the first joke, which was like a joke about Barbie's is a doll with boobies, which is just like a stupid lame joke.
Yeah,
like everyone in the audience just immediately goes, "Who the fuck is this guy?" Right? And like once that happens, you're fucked. Like it's over, and you can't just walk off stage. You have to finish your act. You have to, and it's just I don't know how to fix this kind of stuff. I don't know how to make these award shows entertaining. Like everyone always says not Tina Fey, Will Ferrell, and oh my god, why can't I remember her name? Bridesmaids. What the fuck? Kristen Wiig. There we go. Will Ferrell and Kristen Wiig came out on stage at one point and just did this masterful bit that was so funny, and everyone's like, they should host it. They should do it. And like, first of all, they don't wanna, because why would you? And second of all, that bit was funny because it was 90 seconds long.
Right.
And it would not work over the course of an entire award show. So stop it. And so I don't know how to fix any of that, but it was just not not a very well directed or managed show either. Like I don't know, this is a personal preference, but they didn't show any clips for the acting awards, which I just feel like if you're about to give award for a performance, you should show a bit of the performance on TV. before
Yeah.
you do that. That's
That-
just like a personal thing of mine.
I mean, it's more fun.
Yeah.
I kind of am there for that. Like I could kind of care less about watching these people receive the awards. I kind of want to like, that's what I like about the Oscars is you kind of get this sampler of little pieces of movies
Yeah.
that you didn't see maybe.
Yeah. The exception to that was the Best Stand-Up Comedy Special Award, which was a new award they did this year. They gave clips of those for some reason, but not of the acting performances.
Very
Weird
strange.
decision.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Ricky Gervais won that one, by the way, which
Okay.
was hilarious.
Good for him. Yeah.
A lot of people in that audience don't like him, and then he won. So like people didn't know he wasn't there. He wasn't at the show. So it was like this weird thing where like some people weren't cheering, and then they had to say, "We accept this award on Ricky's behalf."
That's delightful.
But then they also were doing this thing where like the people announcing and handing off the awards weren't the ones reading the names. So like they would come up and go, and the nominees are, and then they'd cut to like an announcer voice guy saying the names. And that felt weird too. Like it was this weird like handoff. Like, why can't you just have them read the names of the people? I don't know.
Yeah. Everybody's gun shy after what happened a few years ago with the best picture.
Well, they still read the winner. Like the
Okay.
people on stage still read the winner. They just didn't read the nominees, and I don't understand why.
That's weird. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that.
And then there's the best blockbuster award that we talked about last week.
Yeah, the
Matt,
award for winning the most money.
Can you guess which movie that went to?
Mario?
No,
I don't remember.
Barbie.
Oh, Barbie. Yeah, I knew that.
It went to Barbie, the movie that won the most money last year.
I knew that information. I got confused because we were talking about Mario early in the show. Yes.
And it's like it just made the whole thing extremely silly because Barbie was already nominated for Best Picture and the actors, and like it just made it all silly. But I will say, like, you can kind of see the what they wanted to do with this thing, which is the cast and crew of Barbie, I think at that point in the show had realized that they probably weren't going to get to go on stage because Barbie did not win any other award besides this one. And so basically the entire cast got on stage. Margot Robbie got on stage. Greta Gerwig got on stage, and they spoke. And it's like they used this as like this is our moment. And that's what I think the Golden Globes wanted with this award, right? It's like Barbie's probably not going to win, but if we create this new award and we can give it to them, and then we can get the moment of the Barbie team up on stage that everyone wants to see, and maybe more people will watch our award show because of it.
Yeah. It's a good idea. I like it.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It was a silly show. It's the whole thing's very silly, and the Oscars are silly too, but nothing's as silly as the Golden Globes.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's all just marketing fundamentally, but they've figured out how to make marketing fun, which fine, sure, whatever, go for it.
I don't know how to make these award shows more fun though. Like I certainly I watch them and I enjoy them on some level, because I like movies and I like actors and I like seeing the actors talk about their movies and win awards and give speeches. But man, there's just so much filler. There's so much like there's these moments of like weird dead air and moments of like I guess the fun thing about them is you learn which actors are not good at reading teleprompters. You get these incredibly skilled actors that get up on stage and just like do so bad with the prepared remarks on the teleprompter. They're just and then there's some that get up there and they're just like naturals, right? And they're just like just nail it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of wild to see that. Like,
yeah, that's actually I've always thought that was really interesting. Like genuinely, the fact that like, okay, it's one thing to know that Ethan Hawke can give a fantastic performance in front of a camera, but it's kind of another thing to know that he can just walk up in front of this enormous auditorium full of people with live cameras on him and just act like he's just taking a stroll down to the mailbox in terms of like how stressed he appears. It's like these people, they're like mastery over their like faces and bodies is incredible. And that has always been one of the things that I've enjoyed about these award shows is like people who are just so good at that it's mind blowing.
Yeah, the actual genuine movie stars that are movie stars, and not just because they're great actors, because they're just stars. They just master this whole apparatus. They just rule.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know if I said this. Nolan won for best director. Oppenheimer won for best picture drama. Cillian Murphy won for actor. Robert Downey Jr. won for supporting actor. So like, this is I think it won for score too. This is got a lot of awards coming to Oppenheimer, Matt.
Nice. Well, that's good. It's deserved.
Yeah, there was some talks about like a Cillian Murphy versus I can't remember who else, but like that there were going to be like a 2-man race for best picture or for best actor. I think he's just going to get it, man. I think he's just going to get it.
Yeah.
Oh, it was for Maestro, the Bradley Cooper film that they were thinking maybe it would be a 2-way race between Bradley Cooper and Cillian Murphy, and Maestro won nothing. So like I think it's the Golden Globes are so weird and so different from how every other award show does stuff that like the bad thing to do here is to overreact to these things and be like, oh, this is definitely going to match how things are happening in the Oscars. But yeah, we'll see. I think Oppenheimer seems to be slotted in this perfect position to just sweep the shit out of everything.
Well, I'm excited for the first time in years. I'm excited to see.
Yeah, when you get to watch the Oscars and like have seen basically all the films talked about on them.
Exactly.
It's gonna be wild.
Yeah.
Which is a great place to end this conversation. As we said, we will be moving on to our third movie next week. We'll be watching Killers of the Flower Moon, the Martin Scorsese massive epic 3.5-hour drama starring Leonardo DiCaprio. I can't wait, Matt. I hope you folks at home are excited too. I think this is gonna be a really good one.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. I'm sort of I kind of know the subject matter, so I'm anticipating this being like emotionally hard, which makes me
be rough.
Not so much excited, but like, okay, well, I'm going to be watching something really artistic and good on that level. So I'm excited in that sense.
Yeah, it's a 1-2 punch of the American government not looking too good in the Oppenheimer Killers of the Flower Moon combo.
Yeah.
But that's all we had for you folks this week. If you have any opinions about the Golden Globes or about Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, please let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on Twitter at doofmedia. We got a lot of great feedback last week, Matt, about Barbie. Some great perspectives from people that really, I think, made me appreciate the movie on a different level. I also, like, right after our conversation, listened to a lengthy interview with Greta Gerwig. I'm like, man, this woman is really smart. And she's like I still think there's parts of the movie that don't work as well for me, but she really knows what she's doing with this thing. And I love her, and I can't wait to see what she does next.
Yeah. So I definitely appreciated some of the feedback we got where it was just like, oh, this literally didn't occur to me because I was like parsing the scene as a man. And it almost sounds cliched, but it's like I just didn't see the thing that a woman sees when they watch this scene, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
I think that the moment in question we're talking about there was the moment where Barbie rejects Ken. And from our perspective, we're like sympathetic to Ken because like, oh man, you just got rejected. But the listener who left this comment was like, yeah, but like she gets to reject him just without any fear of reprisal or consequence, or just gets to like be free to just say, no, I don't want to do that, and so I'm not going to do that. And that's a really cool perspective that both of us had never thought about. And I think
and the idea being that that's like a impossible fantasy that's being portrayed on the screen. Because in real life a woman cannot assume that, and that just doesn't occur to a man watching that scene. So
definitely. Good movie. I still really like Barbie, even with the complaints with it I had. It's a really good movie. It's really fun.
Yeah, me too. Great. So if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast and you want to see it when it comes out every week, you should subscribe to it. I'm ad-libbing the outro. Gotta reach for the stars. You can subscribe to any of those podcasting platforms that exist on the internet.
Matt, I think you should host the Golden Globes next year.
I think I've got what it takes.
If you like what we do here and want to support us, please consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head over to patreon.com/Doof Media and support us at any of the available levels. We released our new bonus podcast this week called Castle Talk, which Matt and I take a look at the Stephen King based Hulu original series Castle Rock a few episodes at a time. We watched the first 2 episodes this week, and that episode is available right now on Patreon. It's a good one. It's a good show. Watch the show. Support us on Patreon. Listen to the episode. Do those things in that order right now. Go.
Yes. And also, while you're doing that simultaneously with your left hand, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, because each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
Yeah, I agree. Left-handed is for reviews, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, folks, that's it for us this week. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next week for Killers of the Flower Moon. See you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.